people are shook. And they want to try to silence us. So it was reinvigorating, if I'm honest, that this kind of reaction really made me feel like we're finally moving the needle and we're scaring some really powerful people. And rather than get silenced and retreat, we need to keep going. Like this is working. We're organizing, we're building power, and we're scaring some very powerful people.
Welcome to Activists Make History. My name is Peggy Nash. I've been a union activist, a feminist advocate, and for nearly a decade, a member of Parliament in Canada's House of Commons. I know what it's like to start from scratch, against the odds, in building a community campaign or running for political office. Our lives are hugely affected by political decisions, but for the underrepresented in political life, Canadian politics can seem like a secret society designed to shut them out. I'm here with a special series from Perspectives, a Canadian journal of political economy and social democracy, to lift the curtain on these electoral mysteries and show the underdogs how we can do it. This episode could not have been made possible without the generous support of Unifor, Canada's largest private sector union. In Activists Make History, I talk to activists, experts, political leaders, and those like me who've been there and done that, to show you can make real progressive change in how Canadian democracy functions so that we can win a better world through elected office.
Our guest today is Chiara Padovani. She's the founder of the York South-Weston Tenant Union, and she's also a former Toronto City Council candidate. So, Chiara, you and I go way back to your student union days when
That's right.
You invited me to speak about my work as a union negotiator. So it's very interesting that you have become a tenant negotiator and formed a tenant union. So welcome to Activists Make History. And I just want to start off with the nature of the problem that you have been trying to grapple with. What the hell is happening with these high rents and rent evictions? Has something changed that has made life more difficult for tenants, and why?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the affordable housing crisis that we're living today is unprecedented. And I would say that things have definitely changed. And where that kind of stems from, I believe, is the financialization of housing, right? We've moved housing from a social good. Everybody needs a home. Everyone needs somewhere to live, a safe place to live. And we've turned that into a commodity on the market that is being used to just gouge as much profit out of people as possible. And the consequences of that are pretty dire, right? And, you mentioned rent evictions. That's just one example of how really big corporate real estate giants are finding loopholes after loopholes after loopholes to raise rents and suck more and more and more of our hard-earned wages, of our, if you're on a fixed income, just getting more and more income out of people and really leaving people with not much at the end of the day to pay for other things. Things are getting worse for people, but at the same time, you can only push people so far before we start to push back. And so it's at the same time a really exciting time for tenant resistance, for tenant organizing, for tenant power. And it's on the heels of this kind of crisis that tenant organizing is really, really, really growing across the country, and in particular in our neighborhood of York South-Weston.
So let's get into that. You're saying the root of the problem is that housing, and I guess whether it's home ownership, but especially rentals, are less about shelter and more about people making a profit. And when I say people, what I hear you say is really corporations that have taken over more of this market. It's less about somebody renting out a room in their house, although I'm sure people can face steep rental challenges there as well. But it's more about increasing number of corporations buying up rental accommodation, and also I'm understanding houses and renting those out as well. So I want to hear about how you started organizing, but can you give us some examples of the conditions that you have seen or how people concretely have been getting squeezed by all of this?
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? I'll preface this because when we treat something as a commodity, as something to make money off of, we expect that we're, corporations, profit-driven, real estate giants are going to be, that's their motivating factor, is that they're going to try to suck as much profit out of their investments as possible. And I want to say, we often think about the affordable housing crisis as if like the market is out of control. The market's out of control. Rents are just rising. Rents are just out of control. But I don't want to belittle that there are interests that are benefiting from this crisis. And I don't even want to spend too much time or too much weight criticizing these big actually I do, obviously, but they're doing what we know they would do, right? That's what they're going to do. They're going to suck out as much profit out of people as they possibly can. But our government is letting them get away with it. Our government is reducing the tenant protections and rent controls that were protecting tenants before. Our governments are giving more and more of our tax dollars to these big real estate giants, giving them more and more tax breaks. So it's really, these guys are going to do what we always know that they're going to do, right? I don't expect anybody to suddenly, have a eureka moment and become a charitable housing provider, right? But I do expect, and we expect as tenants, that our government is going to protect renters from this type of gouging. And what we've seen over the last, I would say, 10 years in particular, is rather than putting in more tenant protections to protect us from actors that are making this housing crisis completely out of control, we're seeing them take those away. So we're seeing rent control. Doug Ford removed rent control, got rid of rent control, above guideline rent increase, loopholes in the law, let landlords make up reasons to just ignore rent control in the buildings that are protected by it. And then we have, it's been decades since we had vacancy control in Ontario, which is when, you pay what the last tenant paid, right? In between tenancies, they can't just double or triple the rent. So we're seeing these protections be taken away. So yes, the market isn't just this external figure that nobody is, benefiting from. Landlords are raising our rents, and governments are letting them get away with it. And in fact, are giving them more and more tools to get around and raise our rents even more.
So employers, corporations, they behave the way they are designed to behave. And it sounds like government has picked a side, and they have sided with owners rather than renters. So this has put a squeeze on people. But what was the breaking point? How did you start organizing tenants? What got you connecting with people and saying enough is enough? We have to do something. We have to take action. What was the tipping point of that action? And how did you start doing that?
Yeah, I mentioned governments because it's my political advocacy played a big role in how I got involved in tenant organizing and founding the York South-Weston Tenant Union. Back in 2018, I ran for office for city councillor in York South-Weston in Toronto. And my main motivating factor for doing that was because of the housing affordability crisis. I was feeling the squeeze as a renter. I was seeing more and more people getting squeezed out of the neighborhood that raised me, where I grew up, went to school in. And I was looking to our elected officials for leadership. And I was just really disappointed. There was this idea that, this is just the way things are now. This can't change, and really kind of catering to the interests of these big real estate giants rather than my neighbors and I.
The invisible hand of the market.
Exactly. And so I decided to run for office. And, Peggy, the way, this goes is that you have like political insiders and experts who will tell you it's impossible. You're never going to defeat an incumbent. I was running against an incumbent who had held office longer than I had been alive. And, everyone said it's impossible. It's impossible. And the other thing that they would tell me is, don't waste your time in apartments. They would say, don't waste your time talking to renters because renters don't vote. You have to go where voter turnout is the highest. You have to try to get them to vote for you. And I was like, absolutely not. I'm not running a campaign. I'm not running for office to gain power, right? To gain electoral power. I'm running for office because there are serious issues in my community that I want to change. I want to be part of changing those issues. And so my main motivating factor was running because the housing crisis was getting out of control. And we didn't have a single renter on city council. Like, obviously people who have never rented a day in their life have no idea what it's like to try to find an apartment in the city, or what it's like when, you know, your rent is going up or you're getting rent evicted, or any of those challenges that so many people in Toronto who are renters are facing. So we needed some better representation.
Kara, what I found, you talked about, the conventional wisdom is people in apartments don't vote. And, I have canvassed many, many apartments, as you have. And what people often say is, we don't vote because nothing changes. Nobody's fighting for us.
Yeah.
And I know when I was running, I found that if you can address the issues that concern people, they will vote. People are smart. They will act in their own self-interest. And I found that people did come out and vote. And if I had just left it to the people who had traditionally voted and who had voted in majority for other parties, we could not have won. Was that your experience as well? And how did you motivate them?
Absolutely. So what we did over the course of my first campaign back in 2018 was we actually started organizing tenants into tenant associations. When you're running a campaign, people donate to you, you have resources, you have a community office, you are able to print hundreds of thousands of pieces of information that you share as part of the campaign. And I was like, you know what? We don't have to wait to get elected to start making the kinds of changes we need and building tenant power. And so over the course of that election, we organized 2 tenant associations. We had one victory in one of the buildings, had reduced a rent increase significantly for the tenants in that building. That happened like 3 weeks before E-Day. And we were able to distribute tenant rights information to every single renter in York Southwestern, which is like 50,000 households. And that was kind of a really, really exciting victory. Like we can win these things. We can win these things even if we don't hold electoral power. And when E-Day came, and this was the year that Doug Ford merged the wards, and I came within 300 votes of one of the incumbents, but didn't win. I didn't win that election. And I was like, but you know what? We won a significant reduction for hundreds of tenants. And this kind of organizing doesn't need to stop just because the election is over. And we can still win these victories in between elections. And so 2 years later, we founded the York Southwestern Tenant Union. There were 13 building tenant associations that were founding members. And we've been organizing since and have had so many incredible victories since our founding that, that's how we build power, whether it's winning an election or getting a good deal for tenants. You build power with people and organizing people together in their own interests, right? And in solidarity with one another is how we're going to bring about change. There's no other way. There's no other way that change happens. It's only through that collective effort. So we've been building ever since. And I got to tell you, Peggy, we are getting pretty big.
That's incredible. It must put the fear of God into some of your political opponents. And I know when you ran in 2022, you came so heartbreakingly close to winning that election. And you were up against the longest sitting Toronto City Councillor, and you came within less than 100 votes of beating her. And then you found out that her campaign had broken the ethics rules by using constituent emails. Ultimately, no action was taken, but you claimed that there was cheating. And, is the system rigged? Are we just not going to be able to beat that power? Talk about your reaction to that event.
What a rough listen. The election day was a very tough pill to swallow. We came so heartbreakingly close. Like you said, we lost by 94 votes. And it was a hard day because we didn't cross that finish line, but it was a really celebratory day because we came so close to doing the impossible, right? What every political insider says is impossible. Name recognition, that much time, blah, 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 all of these things. It was still a celebratory mood. But when I got the news that the counselor or her office had broken the code of conduct around elections, so broken the election rules, in that election, it was really God, yeah, you start to, I'm not going to lie, right? It crosses my mind, my goodness, right? You try so hard and you got to wonder, is the system rigged to just, maintain the status quo?
I mean, it's always worth it organizing and mobilizing people in the campaign. Some activists I have spoken to who campaigned hard, built incredible movements, but didn't actually win, say that the campaign was the win, that the fact that they got people engaged and mobilized is a win. And you have had so many other wins, but I mean, for other activists like you that are thinking about, well, maybe I should take this into electoral politics, is that a big, oh no, don't do that?
Oh yeah, why would you do that to yourself, right? And yeah, I'm not gonna lie, it was a really tough pill to swallow, to read the Integrity Commissioner's report that found that Councillor Frances Nunziata's campaign had broken the rules during the election. Her campaign, transferred a lot of personal information from constituents to her campaign, which is against the rules. And, as a non-incumbent, you build your list by beating the ground and knocking on doors and organizing in between elections. And that's not something that just gets handed to you. So it does gave her a significant advantage during the election over my campaign. And so it's hard to just accept that. And when it went to city council and, she barely got a slap on the wrist, and just, it's shocking that you can break the rules, get caught, lie about it too, and then still nothing happens, right? That's really frustrating. It makes me wonder, why the hell do I want to get into politics? This is such a dirty, game that people play, and it makes me really wonder. Some people, not Peggy, my friends,
not you.
well, and not me either. But so it does make me wonder that. I'm going to be totally honest with you. But what it also showed, there was a really strong public outcry about this. The counselor is very worried. She's very afraid of what this means for her, so much so that she's getting fancy lawyers to threaten me with lawsuits because I, told people about what the Integrity Commissioner's report said. So it does also show, right, that we're really on the verge of shaking things up. One of the things that I had talked to my husband, a few months ago, was before all of these victories in the tenant union and before this Integrity Commissioner report came out, I'm like, I don't know, we've been working our asses off building community power, and are we really making a difference here? Because the real estate giants, the political elite, they're not coming after me. They're not coming after you. So are we really moving the needle here? And then fast forward, 2 months, I'm getting threatened with lawsuits left, right, and center. I'm feeling you know what? Yeah, I think we are shaking up power now. People are shook. And they want to try to silence us. So it was reinvigorating, if I'm honest, that this kind of reaction really made me feel like we're finally moving the needle and we're scaring some really powerful people. And rather than get silenced and retreat, we need to keep going. This is working. We're organizing, we're building power, and we're scaring some very powerful people.
So don't get quiet, get loud, get louder.
Get loud, exactly.
So after that heartbreaking election, you literally got run over by a truck on your bicycle and broke your leg. And you never stopped. I saw pictures of your husband Bruno pushing you around in a wheelchair. Your leg is stretched out in a cast. I mean, you're absolutely incredible. And that has paid off, as you said, with both really challenging power and having them push back. But you've also had a recent incredible success. In addition to all the success of your organizing, you've had another impressive success. Tell us what you can about that.
So our rents, so we started, 4 buildings went on rent strike in 2023, last year. 2 buildings went on strike in June of last year, and then another 2 went on strike in October. And in both cases, we have made some really, really, really impressive gains and wins. Just last week, we signed a settlement agreement for the rent strikes that started in June. And that was a really, 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 and is still, I'm still feeling it, a really big deal. You know, not only did we win an amicable settlement that took 16 months on rent strike, people, like, just the tenacity of these neighbors coming together and being like, no, we're going to draw a line in the sand. Right. And this is the way organizing works, is you look at whether it's an employer, a bad boss, or a landlord that's just like really, really, really crossing the line. Right. And then you look to your government to say, okay, what are you going to do about this? And governments kind of like put up their hands and say, oh, either ignore you entirely, which is what our local MPP had done, or say there's nothing we can do. Right. There's nothing we can do. And then you come together as a group and you say, we refuse to believe that there is nothing we can do. And if our government isn't going to step in to like put these guys in check, then we're going to do it ourselves. And that's really like the core of tenant organizing, right? Is that you step in and you just take the action yourself. And what's come as a result of that, in 2 buildings, we've had major repairs get done to people's homes. So these were buildings that were in a serious state of disrepair and had been for a long time. So much so that, you know, Canada Post refused to go to the building because it was such a health and safety risk. And this has been going on for years. And we won repairs in every single one of those units. Like that is incredible. And after 16 months of rent strike, trying to get another landlord to the table, we finally did. And we finally got a settlement, you know, an amicable settlement. We finally got a deal. And it just is such an indication when everyone tells you that it can't be done, right? When everyone tells you that's just the way things are, it can't be done, don't even try. Oh my goodness, you're going on a rent strike. Everyone's going to get evicted. And then you get it done. It's an incredible feeling. Like, honestly, it's an incredible feeling. It's really invigorating. And it's proof that, you know, people power and organizing works. And we're feeling pretty great over here, but there are many more fights in the pipeline, but it's good to have these victories under your belts to use as examples to just motivate more organizing and have this movement continue to grow.
That's so impressive, Chiara, and kudos to you and your leadership and all of the organizers and all of the tenants that have been fighting for this. And, you know, when you were speaking, it reminded me of, how the labor movement was formed. What corporations understand is power and money. And if you hit them in the pocketbook, if you are not afraid of their power, but you stand up to them and stand up to them collectively. And if governments refuse to act, then just the negotiation, the direct negotiation between the 2 parties, the collectivity of the group, whether it's tenants or workers, against the power of the corporation. And as a former union negotiator, that when you get a settlement, that feeling of matching that corporate power with the power of people, and making direct gains for them, it's unbelievable. And, you know, your leadership in this has just been so impressive. And you talked about tenacity. Well, you are one tenacious woman, an incredible role model. Are you going to run again in politics?
Oh, of course. I can't let these guys beat me down. Come on. I've got them all really scared right now. So I got to get to City Hall and really shake things up.
You're enough of a thorn in their side. They're probably going to say, God, let's just elect her and get her out of this organizing. I have a feeling you're never going to stop organizing.
Well, I can't wait to be elected and use that office as just an extra organizing force, Like right now, our tenant union, we have a community office. We're really lucky. I turned my campaign office in the last election into a community office. It's where our tenant union has an actual space, a little piece of the city. And we're volunteer run, and we just rely completely on people and contributions from people. So getting the resources that come with holding office, I think, can really, really bolster that organizing. So I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to 2026. I'm looking forward to the next election. I'm definitely going to run.
Somehow I have no doubt, and I'm sure listeners have no doubt that will come to pass. I have two last questions. One is, what is your advice for tenants? If you're a tenant today, you're hearing this, and you are so stressed, so many sleepless nights about how the hell you're going to make rent, what do you advise?
I love this question because it's what I say every time I'm knocking on doors, every time I'm talking to folks, and I say three things. And the first one is, you're not alone. That stress, that weight on your shoulders, you are not the only person in this building, in this street, in this city that is feeling that. Your landlord is always going to try to make you feel like you're all by yourself and want to deal with these issues just on a one-to-one basis, like they're somehow your fault. But you're not alone. And so if you're not the only one worried about making rent at the end of the month, or dealing with the elevators not working, or the mold in your child's bedroom, then you got to remember that you're stronger together. You're not alone, and you're stronger together. So if you get together with your neighbors, suddenly talking to your landlord, you don't feel afraid to bring your demands to your landlord, because you're not going there all by yourself, vulnerable, alone. You're going there with your neighbors and with everyone else in your building. And that becomes not a terrifying thing, but an empowering thing, right? And it's really, really, really empowering to come together and say, you know what, this isn't okay. And all of us are saying this isn't okay. And then the last thing is, and this is what I always do, and this is why I keep this list of victories, is that when we fight together, we win together. And, people feel jaded because we've been beaten down for so long, but we got to remember these victories. And so, I'm going to talk about 33 King. I'm going to talk about 22 John. I'm going to talk about Lawrence and Keel. I'm going to talk about these victories that people have won that seemed impossible before they started talking to each other and fighting together. And so, you're not alone, you're stronger together. And my God, I will be the first to say, when we fight together, we win together, because that's exactly what's happening now.
When we fight, we win.
That's right.
Where can listeners find you? And if they want to volunteer or donate to your organization, how do they do that?
So you can go to chiarapadovani.ca/donate. All of those donations go to our community office. It helps us pay the rent. It helps us, keep the lights on and purchase the supplies. My God, it helps us purchase ink toner, which is so expensive on our printers. It's just so expensive. And we're printing a lot. So if you can chip in $5, that really helps us keep the printers going and the lights on in our office. And you can also donate specifically to the tenant union by tenantunion.ca/donate. We're at Keel and Eglinton in Toronto. So if you wanted to come by, there is always something to do in our community office, run by people. So we're people power run. So you can donate or contribute time, and both are extremely appreciated and keeps us going.
We will put that information in the notes for the podcast. And just in closing, Chiara, let me say you are so inspiring. Your work is so inspiring. I know you're not going to stop. I really look forward to seeing you in Toronto City Hall. And thank you so much for taking the time to be with us on this podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Peggy.
Well, that amazing woman is Chiara Padovani. She is the founder of the York Southwestern Tenant Union, and she's the former and sounds like future Toronto City Council candidate. To learn more about Chiara's work, visit tenantunion.ca, and we'll link that in the show notes.
Activists Make History is a special podcast series from Perspectives, a Canadian journal of political economy and social democracy, a publication and production of the Broadbent Institute. This show could not have been made possible without the generous contribution of Unifor, Canada's largest private sector union. If you'd like to hear more from Activists Make History, share and subscribe to Perspectives Journal on all major podcast platforms, as well as Press Progress's Sources podcast that digs deeper into the news stories you won't find in the major papers. The Perspectives Journal podcast and Sources are proud members of the Harbinger Media Network, Canada's progressive podcast community. Once again, I'm Peggy Nash, your host for Activists Make History and proud member of the Broadbent Institute's Board of Directors. You can read my latest book, Women Winning Office, An Activist Guide to Getting Elected, from Between the Lines Books.